Makers Live on LinkedIn is a space for everyone, where we can come together to shatter convention, get deeper into how leaders are made, increase women's media influence, improve our health physically and mentally, ignite corporate responsibility, and inform our advocacy. We're here to make a statement, all in service of an equitable future in the workplace and beyond. Tune in from wherever you are. It's time for Makers Live on LinkedIn. Hey, good people. Janae Hawkins here, Makers Chief Partnerships Officer. Are y'all ready to get deep author to author? Today's session is about owning our narrative with a dynamic group of writers who have penned stories that inspire collective growth. Moderating today's conversation is Daisy Auger-Dominguez. Daisy is a passionate advisor, global thought leader, and sought-after speaker. I know her as a force for change and an advocate for leaders to take care of themselves so everyone on their team can thrive. Her book, Burnout to Lit Up, is out now. It's a practical guide about preparing for transformation and creating space for new possibilities. Burnout is real, y'all, okay? Leaders are feeling it from all sides, and how can we move from survival to revival? By understanding our stories. So take it away, Daisy, and congratulations from all of Team Makers on Book Launch Day.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Makers Live. I am Daisy Auger-Dominguez. I am a cross-sector global leader, author, and advisor focused on future readying the workforce and building high-performing teams without burning out. And I am thrilled to be here today because today is book launch day for me. Burnt Out to Lit Up is my no-nonsense love letter to managers who want more than just survival. They want to lead with purpose, passion, and resilience, filled with practices to pause, reflect, and reset. This book is your roadmap to reigniting your light and ending burnout culture. Because if we want to lead well, we have to feel well. Today's session is called Author to Author, Books by and for Leaders. We're about to dive into a dynamic conversation about books, the transformative power of authorship, and how to create new narratives for ourselves. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them a bit later. Writing Burnt Out to Lit Up was a healing journey for me, a process of reflection and renewal, shaped by my experiences as a C-suite executive on the front lines of change during some of the most tumultuous times of our lives. It became my personal pharmacy after being burnt to a crisp. The book speaks to the urgent need for leadership that balances skillful management with genuine humanity, offering strategies to navigate everyday tensions while restoring energy, clarity, and intention. It's a roadmap for creating healthier, more productive workplaces through moments of pause, reflection, and rejuvenation, so we can all lead with purpose, passion, and resilience. If you're looking to fall back in love with work and inspire your teams, this is the book you've been waiting for. And I'm so honored today to welcome our panelist, Jezz, my friend. Let's start with you. Jezz is a multidisciplinary artist whose work explores personal and collective change through the lens of race, gender, trauma, disability, and neurodivergence. They've been recognized internationally by Spain's El País, Portugal's Público, Vogue, Teen, Vogue, Logo TV, and Made of Millions. You can listen to their podcast with Deem Journal titled Dreaming Different and read their debut collection of poetry, prose, and practices titled This Way to Change, a gentle guide to personal transformation and collective liberation. Jezz has lived in Georgia, Texas, and California, and is now based in Brooklyn, New York, like I am. So good to have you here.
Thanks, Daisy. And I didn't realize today was launch day. Congratulations. Happy launch.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, the incredible Raquel Willis is also joining us today. Raquel Willis is an award-winning author, activist, and media strategist dedicated to Black transgender liberation. She has held groundbreaking posts, including Director of Communications for Miss Foundation for Women, Executive Editor of Out Magazine, and National Organizer for Transgender Law Center. She co-founded Transgender Week of Visibility in Action and currently serves as an executive producer for iHeartMedia's Outspoken, the president of the Solutions, Not Punishments Collaborative's executive board, and is a WNBA Social Justice Council member. Her debut memoir, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, on life and liberation, was released in November 2023 via St. Martin's Press. I am so thrilled to have you both here today. Thank you for joining. I'm really excited to frame this conversation around the topics of my book, Burnt Out to Lit Up, because at its core, this is a book about passion, clarity, and intention. It's for current leaders, aspiring managers, or anyone who's looking to reignite that spark and lead with purpose. In the book, I share that my passion for leading people is fueled by a belief in the transformations that happen when people seek understanding. When we understand ourselves better, we can create workplaces and communal spaces that work for everyone. So let's dive in, starting with the first part of my book, recognizing the fires. It's challenging for many of us, especially managers and leaders, to spot burnout in ourselves and our teams, particularly in high-stress, chaotic environments, which is pretty much what the world of work is right now. Women and people of color often bear the weight of multiple stressors, such as navigating bias, microaggressions, and emotional labor that often goes unacknowledged. These pressures, whether visible or not, can sometimes become catalysts for change. My book is about taking what you know about yourself and leading not just more effectively, but more wholly, bringing your full humanity into leadership to create better outcomes for everyone and the organizations that we serve. And I should say, it is not just women and people of color, but also non-binary and any underrepresented people and colleagues and workers in our organizations. We carry these invisible burdens, and sometimes we need stories to be able to share, to see ourselves in them. Both of your books touch on personal self-discovery. When did you realize that you wanted to or needed to write a book about your past and present experiences? Jess, let's start with you.
Oh, what a question. So Daisy and I met actually while I was working in advertising. We were both involved with AdColor, which is an incredible organization. They've been around for years, just championing people and bringing people together and creating community. And I talk about burnout. I burnt out really early on because I started working at a place called Media Arts Lab, which is Apple's ad agency of record. So it was just, the standards were so high, so much pressure always. And then I ended up working at an ad agency called Anomaly in New York City. And I was also burnt out and just trying to perform way past my capacity. And during all these years where I was in the creative department for some of those years, where I was the only femme person, only person of color, and being the only person in the room, the only blank in the room, there was a lot of things that happened that were infuriating and disheartening. And so I would write about them. And what I actually wanted to write was, my book initially was supposed to be a workplace survival guide for people of color, because I was like, this needs to exist. I wish someone had told me, I wish someone had given me a guide when I first started and said, hey, this is how you can respond when this happens. And hey, don't forget your power in this situation. Don't let people gaslight you into blank, blank, blank. But as I was writing that, I was on my own journey of self-discovery, and I was coming into my queerness, more deeply into my queerness, and studying queer theory and reading like Jose Esteban Munoz. And I was building queer community and realizing that I'm autistic, which is a huge revelation to have in your late 20s. This was when I was in my late 20s, and I'm in my mid 30s now. But as I was going through all of this, it just became clear that I needed deep healing. And in order to do that, I've always written poetry, and writing has always been the place that I healed. So I started writing, and then a bunch of poems came out of me instead. And So I kind of pivoted, and instead of writing this workplace survival guide for people of color, I ended up writing this guide to changing yourself to change the world, based off of Grace Lee Boggs's teachings to transform yourself to transform the world. So it was really a journey in kind of meeting myself where I am. And it was we're meant to write the book that we want to see in the world. And the book that I wanted to see in the world changed.
Oh, I love that. The book that you wanted to see, and how it changed. Thank you so much. Raquel, please tell us about your journey.
So the risk it takes to bloom obviously has been decades in the making, because it's a memoir. So I guess I have to kind of go back and say, when did I first know I had a story? And that came in my youth, growing up as a young Black kid in Augusta, Georgia, in a very Catholic, traditional family. I knew that I was different, and, was figuring out gender nonconformity, queerness, why did I have crushes on peers that I wasn't supposed to? And so that kind of idea gave me a sense of this story that was bubbling in me. And I felt a lot of dread as a young person around having to eventually share my truth so that I could kind of shatter these expectations enough to maybe breathe a little easier. I mean, that's kind of all in the title, that risk that I think a lot of queer and trans people have to make. But also Jezz, and hearing you talk about autism, right? And so what is it like to come out about that experience? Or, if someone is living with HIV, or, anything, right? There are all of these different ways that we have to kind of shatter expectations to breathe a little bit more. And so those were kind of the origins of the story. When I think about getting older, coming into my transness, at the University of Georgia while studying journalism, I kind of started my career being stealth, as we say in community, not being out as trans, and definitely not being out as queer. And this was around 2013 or so. So there wasn't really a path for me where I felt like I could be open about all of these parts of my identities. I felt like I had to kind of hide all of that so that I could have this career in journalism. But lo and behold, I was shaken to the core by the death by suicide of a young trans girl by Leila Alcorn, or a young trans girl named Leila Alcorn in 2014. And in her letter that she set to publish on Tumblr, she said, "Fix society, please." Basically had this call to action to particularly trans adults. And I took that personally. I felt complicit in my silence, what little bit of privilege and platform I had accrued in my growing career. I wasn't utilizing it to make it easier for the next folks coming up. And so that completely shifted everything. So it's interesting to talk about the workplace and how it kind of impacts us. But I firmly believe that it's actually been the experiences that have happened outside of the workplace that have most transformed me. And those lessons, I'm constantly trying to figure out, how do I import those things that have happened externally, whether it's been in community organizing in the streets of Atlanta, or community organizing in New York, or nationally. How do I import those lessons into the workplace so that people can show up fully, and maybe I can help them figure out what their purpose is and be truly supportive of that purpose as well.
Oh my goodness. Well, I want to say thank you to both of you, because not just as an author, but as a person navigating this world, and helping others try to figure out how to navigate this world on their own. We know that we need to see each other. We need to read these stories. We need to have moments where we see what's happening to us as valid and real, not just these lonely experiences that we have to navigate the world by ourselves trying to figure out. And so thank you so much for sharing your stories and for being that for so many others who need it. I took a radical sabbatical. That's what I called my sabbatical last year. And through that experience, this book was born. And it was through rest and reflection that I gained the clarity that I needed in how I wanted to show up at this stage in my leadership and in life, and how I could better support others in their own journeys. In part 2 of my book, it's called Navigating the Flames. I explore the Eastern concept of hungry ghosts, which are those fears and limiting beliefs, mental blocks, and the endless demands that consume our time and attention, which often hold us back from truly fulfilling our purpose in life and our happiness. You are both leaders in social justice and collective liberation movements. Did you have to let go of particular fears or beliefs to see yourself as a leader in these spaces? Raquel, I'm going to go to you first on this one.
Definitely. As I kind of said, I guess, in my last response, a lot of those fears I've had to let go of along the course of my life, right? Shattering the expectations that my parents, the church that I was a part of, the community and society had for me as a young Black person to grow up to be straight and cisgender and all of these things. I had to let a lot of that go. And I think that those lessons primed me to be able to let go of professional expectations, right? And that, can run the gamut. I mean, we can talk about aesthetically what that means, right? For me to have twists like I do right now was not something that was okay for someone pursuing journalism, particularly a Black woman, 10 or so years ago, right? That's why we have things like the Crown Act to defend and protect the right for particularly women of color, but other folks to, show up fully as themselves, particularly in a cultural sense. So I think about those things, right? Those expectations that kind of operate as fears. I also dealt with, as a young trans woman, having to feel like I had to live up to, these feminine ideals, right? I had to sound a certain way, right? I had to dress a certain way. I had to always have like a full-on glam beat. All of those things, right, I think are some of those expectations I felt as a young trans woman who maybe face maybe more drastic kind of standards there. But I think also, thinking about the idea of what a Black trans person or woman can achieve, or is capable of in terms of leadership.
Oh, tell us more about that.
I think for a lot of folks, the idea of a Black trans woman is that we aren't in the workplace and definitely not in positions of leadership. We can even look at the LGBTQ plus nonprofit structure, right? Overwhelmingly, that is a lane where trans women of color and Black trans women have been able to eke out maybe some kind of professional life or career. And yet, overwhelmingly, we are not represented in the leadership of national LGBTQ plus organizations or nonprofits, right? Despite our brilliance being peppered through speeches, peppered through grant proposals, peppered through annual reports, right? That is still a thing that we face. And I know that women of color, folks of color across the board can understand that, right? So much kind of siphoned from us in this kind of visionary sense. And people forget that we also have the strategy, honey, that many organizations and institutions would not exist without our contributions. So those are things that I've had to figure out how to navigate around. And what has always sustained me has been having community, whether it's building community in these institutions, right? Hearing other folks share the ways that they feel discounted, right? So maybe we can build solidarity and bring these issues to maybe folks who have more power in an institution. That's community organizing, right? Those are things that have to happen within any institutions, particularly in the workplace.
Oh my goodness. Yes, yes, and yes. I want to hear from Jezz now. Sorry.
I know, but let me leave
please.
one thing. One thing is, I do think it's important for us to consider the boxes that maybe a lot of us feel like we have to check off to get into the workplace. What are the ways that we can make the next folks not have to check off so many boxes that we had to? And that's always my hope.
Oh, amen. I'm right. Yes, +1 plus 1,000 to that, because and I'm pretty sure Jezz is going to say pretty much the same thing I am. So go ahead, Jezz, please.
I mean, +1 to all of that, Raquel. I remember also, just to give you your flowers, you were one of the voices that I looked to when I was trying to understand how can I contribute to this legacy of queer liberation? While I was coming into my queerness, while I was kind of just looking for voices of people who are actively involved in building power, because that's what I hear and heard in everything that you're saying. It's this practice of building power, which has to be done with other people, but also building power within ourselves. And I mean, it's so important to uplift Black trans wisdom, Black trans femme wisdom, because that, like, I mean, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, that are the originators of the Pride movement that we have today. And I mean, similarly for Asian American women in the workplace too, if people have heard of the concept of bamboo ceiling, I don't really like that term, because I feel like that term in itself, like, who came up with that? But the bamboo ceiling is just these proven, like, there's been all of these, like, Harvard Business School studies that have shown that there is a clear kind of ceiling that people hit. And even for me, when I was in advertising agency, and I would look around, and consistently I would always be staying late after work. It also had to do with my ADHD and not being able to start work until everyone left the office. But I would look around, and consistently I was like, why are all the Asians the last ones here? And it just kind of, that curiosity kind of led me to really dig into the history of Asian American history, the legacy of, like, Chinese Exclusion Act, the Chinese laborers, the incarceration of Japanese Americans, like the long legacy, and how that has contributed to anti-Asian violence that we have seen over the past 4 years. There's just everything that, like, that's why it's so important for us to engage with people's stories, because it's not representative of one person. Yes. That one person's story is representative of a legacy of legislation, of cultural norms, of rules, and we don't even know how to change them if we can't identify them. So it's so important to put language. And for me, my journey, well, I'm still kind of on a journey of, I don't consider myself a leader in this space, I guess. It's really weird, because for me, I'm just talking about my experiences and my everyday frustrations. And I'm saying, hey, the people I love are being attacked and literally murdered. Can we address this? Like, the stakes feel so high that I'm like, I don't consider myself an activist for having values and living by them. I don't think that should be considered an extraordinary thing. But in this day and age, where it is literally incentivized for people to think in such an individualistic point of view, and like just me, that is considered radical in this day and age. But I think we are living in times where we cannot afford to not be active participants in each other's lives. We must be active participants in each other's liberation, in each other's safety. I think that's what I think, like, we use these terms like collective liberation, equity. What it really means is, can we help people feel safer day to day? Like in New York City, can we help queer and trans people feel safe walking to the train? As an Asian American person, can I feel safe, like, walking outside and not feeling like I'm going to get stalked or, again, murdered? Like, it's really harsh words, and it can sound really scary, but that's just what we're dealing with at this time. So I think that's why, yes, I have fears, but my fears are just so small in comparison to the work that needs to be done. So whenever I get scared, I'm like, it's really not about me. And it's not even about me feeling like, oh, like social anxiety, or I'm saying to like, I think telling your personal story can feel really vulnerable. But when I get kind of in my head about that, again, I'm like, this isn't about me. This is about a larger movement that we all need to plug into.
And you both make it about the collective and the global movement. And I hate to say it, Jess, but you are a leader. You've been a leader since the day I met you, but just, I will put it out there, because you have been telling the stories, you have been naming it, you have been doing it, as have you, Raquel. So thank you both so much for the intentionality and the care that you put into your work. I want to ask you another question, because my career spans sectors and industries, giving me a unique perspective in how work gets done, similar to the two of you, particularly in areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me, leading people and culture functions. In part 3 of my book, Leading Through an Inferno, I dive deep into how we can reignite what lights us up to become better people leaders. And personally, I like to write down my why every morning before starting my workday. It's a practice that helps me get grounded in purpose and clarity. How do you describe the work that you do to the people you love? And what makes the work meaningful for you? You've already shared a bit, but I'm curious, Jess, how do you describe your work to those people that you love? And how do you find that light and joy in this work?
I do a lot of different things, so it can be really hard to describe succinctly, because I really just follow my passions, and I have ever since. I think that's been the through line. But to summarize, I think the main intention of all of my work across my writing, performing, I've been pursuing an acting career the past few years. I'm a vocalist. Everything I do and make and put out there, I hope to help people feel less alone and more alive. And it's because I've, experienced chronic depression, anxiety, ADHD, I'm autistic. I have complex PTSD. There's so many things that I live with that make me feel so isolated on a daily basis, that so much of my work is in me kind of telling people that there's a different world that we can build, and how about these are the steps that we can take to make that world happen. And so much of me, I think so much of practicing justice is just practicing listening, being a listener, listening to what is needed, who is suffering, how can we alleviate that suffering, how can we use our personal gifts, our passions, our interests and our power, the power that we have to create a better world. So I consider myself a world builder in that way, I guess. I consider myself a world builder even in terms of, like, I wrote my first movie this year, and that is a lot of world building. I make zines, like that in itself is me. Like, everything I do is just kind of is with that intentions. And it just, I'm always asking, how can I be of service to the collective, and how can I change myself to embody the change that's needed in the world today?
Oh, I love that, Jess. Thank you. How about you, Raquel?
Yeah, I love that too. Congrats, Jezz. I constantly am saying these days that I straddle storytelling and social justice. When I started my career, the idea that you would call yourself both a journalist and an activist, for instance, was like not okay. All of these kind of alleged principles of objectivity and being an unbiased communicator that you often learn in traditional journalism school were the things that I was kind of saddled with. But I realized that to claim to be unbiased is a lie. And you are not clear about what your values are and telling stories in line with that, then you are beholden to the status quo, which is white supremacy, which is the patriarchy, which is the worst of capitalism and so many other systems of oppression in this world. And so I am today, of course, emboldened to say that, yes, I contain these multitudes. I also believe that stories are one of the most universal and accessible organizing tools. You just got to figure out what elements of your story that you're willing to relinquish to the world and how to utilize them in the best way possible, whatever method and modality that is, right? So those are things that are important to me. I also am constantly interested in supporting folks and shattering the expectations that hold them back. Oftentimes that is around gender, but it can be around so many different things. Invested in us understanding that our stories are just one thread in a larger tapestry, right? So how are we understanding our position within the collective, that we can both be and often are both an oppressor to someone and oppressed by someone or some system. So we have to have humility around those things. And then I think the last thing is supporting folks and understanding that we're always missing nuance. So I'm constantly interested in the question of what stories are we missing? What voices are we missing? And what can we do to more reorient ourselves or censor them?
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. And as you were talking, Raquel, I thought so much about the imposter syndrome questions that I had when I was writing my book. Who am I as a C-suite executive to be writing a book about joy and leadership, right? I was like, and I had to turn that around, right? Reframe that narrative for myself and say, who am I not to write this story, right? It is a collective story, and it is, to your point, Jess. It is a set of stories. We do not have universal truths in just one story, but we have to share these stories because they are part of our legacy, our heritage, and what we bring to the world. And I'm so grateful that both of you have the courage, and also neither one of you has used this word, but the humility that you enter into these conversations and this work is something that really touches me. And so I appreciate your humanity and kindness in that. In the last part of my book, I call it Beyond Burnout. And all the research and studies that I read for this book led to the inevitable conclusion that I think both of you will agree with, which is that burnout is a systemic and a societal problem. It's not a you problem, right? I summed it up as burnout isn't a solo performance. And I offer practical strategies, but I really call these practices to support yourself as an individual in a burnout cycle, like reframing your inner scripts, right? Those dated narratives that hold us back from really showing up as how we want to show up. How do we fuel our light in those moments of darkness? How do we release the shame that keeps us from really walking into our light? And I want to ask both of you, what are some ways that you balance taking care of yourself and advocating for your community, right? How has that understanding of supporting your well-being help you become a better leader, or whatever you want to call yourself, Jess, in this world? And Raquel, I'll start with you.
Well, the word that comes up for me is trust. And I think it's about trusting, building relationships and trusting that there are other folks who are carrying this work alongside you. So I think I've often felt, that, okay, well, if I can't do it, then is it going to happen? Right. And I felt that particularly, I think, at a younger point in my career, or an earlier point in my career. But, now it's a little different. I think some of it is like age, like, it's weird in queer and trans community that, the window to becoming older or, a more seasoned leader is shorter, right? And so I'm still in my early 30s, and yet, people look to me as like an auntie of sorts. Right? And with that means, okay, I can acknowledge that I have all of these peers that are moving this liberation work as well. I'm going to trust them to hold down the things that they have committed themselves to, but also that there are younger generations of leaders that are demonstrating their power as well. And so what are the ways I can pour into them so that I can chill a little bit? I feel like I'm the only one holding this, right? So it's about humility. It's about letting go of ego, because capitalism will have us believe we're the only ones that can do something. No, baby. Like, you're special, but you're not that special, right? And so those are the things that I try to relinquish, and a lot of that has come with trust and also extending grace to other folks, right?
Yes.
That just because someone dropped the ball on this one thing doesn't mean that they fully dropped the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
So give grace, just the same. I may have dropped a ball, right? But that doesn't mean that I've completely relinquished my commitment and duty. So trust and grace have been the guiding principles for me.
I love that, Raquel. And grace to yourself also. Sometimes we have to offer grace to ourselves because, like you said, we mess up. We don't have to do all the things. We don't have to be any, because this is exactly how we burn ourselves out and how we don't show up as our best selves. And I loved your point about becoming an auntie in your 30s. It's like, it gets a little bit, it's a little bit like, wait, what? For me, they call me señora. Doña in Spanish. And I'm like, wait, who's that? I'm like, this is who I am now. Okay. But it is beautiful to be able to hand the baton to somebody else and see them shine and see them do this work. Jezz, how do you protect your well-being?
Oh, okay. Quick note on the like shortened, like eldership. I got called an elder for the first time a couple months ago, and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm looking for elders. I am absolutely not. But I think it does speak to this larger kind of I do want to bring up this idea of pedestaling that can happen. I think that we can look to people and think that they have all the answers. And then we forget, again, our own power and our own agency and our own choice. And that exactly what Raquel said, it is this trust and grace and this mutual understanding of, okay, all of these movements, for me, I'm a big student of abolition and disability justice. These are movements that have been going on for decades, a long time. And so I try to just be a student. That's what I'm kind of always reminding myself. And I try to remember, I'm such a nerd for framework. So 2 frameworks that have really been helpful for me is Deep by EA's social change ecosystem map. And it just has all of these different roles that you can play, right? Like storyteller, healer, frontline worker, all these different things. And it's something that can be helpful to understand, oh, I'm right here right now. And actually, I'm growing out of this role and I'm moving into here, and we can change and be fluid. We can step into one role for one situation, but being neurodivergent, my capacity changes hour to hour. So it's about kind of tuning into your capacity. What do I have capacity for? Is this something that I actually want to do too, or do I feel like I have to do it because of guilt or how other people see me? Because it should always come from a place of like, I want to do it. And then Mia Mingus's pod mapping framework has also been helpful too. I really love Mia Mingus's writing and just understanding the idea of interdependence, like self-care plus community care. If you're kind of veering too much into one, where sometimes I'm just fully focused on taking care of everyone else, then I'm like, okay, it's time for more self-care. But then if I'm so in my world that I'm being isolated from my community, then I try to focus on kind of extending care. So it's this really delicate dance, and it's never going to be perfect, and we're never going to be fully balanced. At least that's been the case for me. And I write about that a lot in This Way to Change, kind of how to practice that inner reflection to understand case by case basis. Is this a time where I should show up, or is this a time where I should rest and listen? Because listen and being a witness too is also being a participant in a way.
Oh my goodness. So many nuggets of wisdom. And when you said that, I was reminded of a practice that I started with my team. I would get invited to a million meetings during the day, and I would pause and ask, am I the right person to be at that meeting? Am I the right subject matter expert? Should we consider somebody else? And this was frankly an opportunity for me to create space in my schedule and time, but also to normalize asking the questions that help us balance people's time and energy. And so that, it's a practice that we have to take on ourselves, and some of that modeling it for others to give them freedom to do the same. You have both just been so incredibly generous, and this has been just such a lovely, beautiful conversation. I want to give space for these lovely panelists now to share how we can support their current work. Raquel, how can the audience support your work?
Yeah, I would say check out my website, which has a link to my book, The Risk It Takes to Bloom. So anyone can support that. My website is raquelwillis.com. And then I am, as we haven't actually discussed this, but I'm a part of a collective called Gender Liberation Movement. And we are bringing together the energies around repro justice and gender affirming care. Go to genderlib.com where we need all the donations and support.
Yes.
We are a grassroots volunteer run effort. And we had a big march in Washington, D.C. this last weekend.
Please.
And we plan even more mobilizations in media and direct action.
You heard it here. Make sure you follow Raquel and her beautiful work. And Jezz, please let us know where we can find you and your work.
I am at Jezz Chung, JEZZCHUNG, across everything. My book, This Way to Change, is out anywhere books are sold. It's now out in audiobook. Personally, I've been a big audiobook listener since the beginning of this pandemic. So my reading retention has kind of gone down. So it's available on audiobook. I also have a podcast called Dreaming Different, and it's all about building a future through a neurodivergent lens. So I talk about queering neurodiversity. There's an episode about disability, superpowers, and neurodivergent strengths. And season 2 will be out soon. You can find that on deemjournal.com/audio. There's transcripts for all 6 episodes also. And then I also facilitate workshops. I come into organizations and companies and agencies and facilitate workshops about mental health and well-being, self-care and collective care, combining the two, about just all kinds of different topics. I'm doing one in a couple days actually about how to be yourself while working with others. So people can reach out at my website, jezzchung.com, to bring me in for a workshop.
All right, everyone, you heard it here. You know how to find Jezz and Raquel for all of the amazing work that they do. And make sure you support them and think of them as you are going about in your day-to-day life and at work. Jezz Chung, Raquel Willis, I am just blown away by all that you have shared today. I appreciate you taking the time to be open and honest, all of you, with our audience. And if you didn't know, you are all officially part of the Makers community. We are a tight community here. We look forward to supporting and uplifting you as your journey as a change maker continues. Thank you again with deep gratitude.
Thank you so much, Daisy, for facilitating this conversation, and Makers for organizing.
Yeah,
thank you both. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us live on LinkedIn with Makers. Please don't forget to follow at Makers Women on socials for more storytelling and ways to stay connected. My book, Burnt Out to Lit Up, is available everywhere books are sold today. The link is in the chat for you all to check it out. I'm excited to see you next time. Thank you.